leaders of business and industry, friends, it's an honor for me to be here today. And I'd like to begin by telling you why it's an honor. We see India as a national structure. But if you go back slightly more than that, go back 100 years, 200 years, you'll find that India actually is energy. It is a force. That force came from our rivers. Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati. We worship these rivers. And the reason we worship them was because that was where our energy came from. Now, we've gone way beyond that. We have built structures that are allowing this energy to rise, to explode. And it's an honor for me to be here, because as this energy moves from India and goes abroad, you are the cutting edge. You are the people on the first line. And you're the people who are our ambassadors. You're the people who tell the world what this energy is about. Over the last couple of years, you have done a tremendous job. The image of India has changed. I went to university in 1991, and I remember nobody thought of India. Nobody is saying that today. And a huge part of that is because of you. I think the way it's going to work is I'm going to give a little speech and then we're going to have questions, right? It was a dark night some years ago when my team and I got on the Gorakhpur-Lokmanya Tilak Express and traveled across India's heartland. Moving across the train and talking to travelers, youngsters, weary families, and migrants moving from the dust of Gorakhpur to the glitter of Mumbai. I remember a young boy from Purvanchal, Girish, who painted the outside of skyscrapers. There were two carpenters, one of them traveling from his village to Mumbai for the very first time. Imagine the feeling of a young fellow getting on the train, coming out of his village, going to Mumbai. Spoke to a young Muslim boy setting out to start his life. He had no idea what work he was going to do. What struck me about that train was the optimism. These were poor people, weak people, but not one of them was pessimistic. By the time we reached Mumbai, we had made friends with Girish the carpenter. And he told us, come and see where I live. And we thought, let's see what this little young migrant is doing. We had a little chat. Very smart fellow, entrepreneur like all of you, except he had the empty pockets. And he says, come to the chai wala. We go to the chai wala, there's 5-6 of us, and he buys us all tea. And he insisted that nahi, main to kharidunga. That is the spirit of this country. And the story of the story of Girish exemplifies the idea of empowerment. It exemplifies the Indian worker, the Indian entrepreneur. And as we talk here, 1 billion people are breaking their shackles. They're coming out and they're claiming their place in the sun. India is home to the largest pool of human capital the world has ever known. It is this energy that is producing your best managers. It's driving the stock market. And it's the energy providing labor for all your factories. It drives the consumption upon which your businesses are built. We are now sitting on an unstoppable tide of human aspiration, a tide so great that it is going to move forward regardless of what we do. The force that this movement is generating, and we need to use it to empower everybody. Not one person, not almost everybody, but everybody. We have to provide the roads on which our dreams are paved. They can't have potholes. They can't break down in 6 months. They have to be big roads because they're going to carry strong people. People were not the only thing moving on that train. Ideas moved with them. And in the 21st century, we need to make ideas move fast. Why should a mother sleep at night worrying about whether her brilliant child will find a school to go to? Why are our students forced to study obsolete things? I'm a pilot. They gave me the curricula. I opened the book. Large section in the book. How to drop mail from aeroplanes. How many of you are getting your mail dropped from aeroplanes? But we're teaching it to our kids. Guys flying a A340 looks out and they're telling him, listen, you need to know how to drop mail from planes. Do you have a role? Do you have a role in our education curriculum? Do they ask you? Do they? Do you? Our university structures are closed, they're silos. But a university today is a network. It's no longer a silo. I oversee a women's self-help group, and chatting to them once, I told them this. I said, the President of the United States, he said that a rising tide raises all boats. The woman looks at me and she says, Rahul bhaiya, hamare paas to nao hi nahi hai. A rising tide doesn't raise people who don't have a boat. We have to help build the boat for them. It's not good enough to raise the tide. One of the biggest problems poor people have is identification. If you go to a village, the village knows each other. The villager leaves the village. He loses all that information and nobody else has it. Let me go back to the women for a bit. A second. Yeah. Let me go back to the women. They told me they have no boats. So I've lost it now, 1 second. Okay. They told me they have no boats. The work they do right now, as we're sitting here in this nice AC'd hall, they're building not only our boats, they are the waves. They are not only building boats, they are the waves. To meet these challenges, we must remember that we have a tendency in India to think about solving all our problems incrementally. This is a mistake. There are some problems that require exponential solutions. Whenever India has done well, it has done so not by incremental steps, but by radically transforming its structures. Look, if we went about the telecoms revolution in the 80s by distributing telephones one by one and going slowly house by house, Sam Pitroda wouldn't be sitting here with us. He would be somewhere in Kalahandi distributing telephones. He wouldn't have that wonderful white hair. He'd be bald. I have no interest in going bald, even though it's looking pretty likely at this stage. So that is my message. Thank you for coming here and listening to me. Thank you.
The issue which I wanted to ask of how we can further improve is the issue of center-state relationships. Based on our constitution and the federal structure, the states have their own rules and regulations, center has their own rules and regulations, and very often economic development and progress gets hampered because of lack of cohesion or lack of a unified thinking of how to carry a particular project or a particular vision forward. Do you think there's something we can do to actually increase the harmony?
Would you like me to give you the political answer, the actual structural answer? No, it will be honest. Both answers will be honest. One is a structural answer. Practical answer of what is actually going on in the country. Right? And it's slightly complicated, so you'll have to bear with me. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Let me give you the numbers, approximate numbers. I'm an MP. I get 5 crores a year. I have 700 pradhans who work with me. Each one of those pradhans is working with a couple of crores. That's the difference in power. That's a complicated answer, but that's actually the answer. There is no structural conversation. I sit in on some of the committees in Parliament. Right? The committees call whoever they want. It's totally based on what they feel like. There has to, why isn't there a systematic way that, listen, if we're trying to make this bill, then these are all the people who have to come into the room. Even If I compare my job 8 years ago, it is a completely different job. Because the structure has changed. And the system is not responding to the structure. The political parties are not responding to this structure. In the whole country, including, I've done this, in the whole country, including the BJP Congress, pushing it hard, 200 to 300 people. Now, how can you talk about state-center relations if 200 people are defining those Vidhan Sabhas and Lok Sabhas? That's what your problem is. And we call it corruption. It's imposing massive costs on you. No one talks about this. People talk about Rahul Gandhi. People talk about, individuals. No one talks about, listen, let's open this thing out. And you open this thing out, large numbers of your problems will be fixed far, far away by lower level people. You're a wonderful institution. Right? Where is your counterpart in the government? Inside the government. Where is your counterpart that brings people into the committee? It doesn't exist. So you're empowered, but you're actually disempowered. And that's all the way down. That's the poorest guy in the village. He's also disempowered. There are 1 billion people in this country. It's not important what Rahul Gandhi thinks. It's important what the 1 billion people think. So then we go into this model where you're going to have the one guy who's going to come and he's going to fix everything. He's going to come on a horse. That's the model. That's the Indian model. He's going to come on a horse. Sun's going to be in the background. There's 1 billion people waiting. He's coming in and everything's going to be nice. No, it's not going to work like that. The chief minister of Assam has fixed everything. This is ridiculous. It's got to be about what are the structures we are building, what are the machines we are putting into place, how are we bringing voice into the system. And none of that debate takes place. And frankly, I get frustrated. I read the newspapers, I'm like, it's always about a person. It's never about voice of people. It's never about voice of business. It's never about voice of the telecom industry. Systematically, not individually. And listen, if you're expecting Manmohan Singh ji or someone else to solve everything here, you're going to keep expecting it. Our power is only going to come when we channel that thing, that river of Indian people. There are two types of systems. There is a centralized system and there is a decentralized system. We're not an elephant. We're a beehive. We're a beehive. Which one is more powerful? An elephant or a beehive? Sorry, I'm going to have to do this. I said, show me your hand. I said, you see, this is how China applies power. When I apply power like this, he feels it. He understands it. And he says, hey, you're holding my hand. You're pressing me down. Now, this is how India applies power. There are people doing yoga in New York, dancing around. That's Indian power. You go to a nightclub somewhere in Spain, and there's Amitabh Bachchan on the screen there dancing around. That's Indian power. That's the power of the beehive. Story, one fellow came, a friend of mine came from China, Italian guy. He says, I was on a bus in China. The bus hit a man. The driver picked up the man and put him on the side of the road, and we carried on. No complexity there. The beehive is a good analogy. I happen to come from a chain of people. DNA, it's the DNA. I come from a chain of people. I've been told, boss, here you are. Okay. Now, I'll tell you one thing. The idea we love of the guy on the horse. There's a guy who's going to come on the horse and he's going to come charging through, and we do it all the time. Let's keep the Biharis out of Mumbai. Just beat them up when they come. Just thrash them. How dare the Biharis come into Mumbai? Absolutely not. What is compassion? It's just listening. Nothing else. It's just listening to what the other person is saying. Somebody else saying, boss, when are you going to be PM? Somebody saying, no, you're not going to be PM. Somebody saying, maybe you will be PM. I promise to come back. I just like to end by saying one thing.